Okay, guys, so this week we are going to be learning about self portraits. Now, some of you guys have already experienced creating a self portrait, so let's just get right into this. So, our standard for this assignment is really focusing on us observing, experiencing, and using our imagination to create a work of art. Our I can statements for this assignment is I can create a digital design or 2D artwork. I can create a self portrait by observing or using my imagination. And I can improve my digital art skills or drawing skills over time. So, the vocabulary that we're going to be focusing on for this assignment will be self portrait, observation, and imagination. So last week we kind of talked about a portrait a little bit, and we said that a portrait is a picture of a person and it's usually showing their face. Okay. So we looked at different pictures of portraits. So all four of these can be considered a portrait because they are focusing on somebody's face. Now, the difference between a portrait and a self portrait is that it's going to be a picture of your face. So, for instance, here is a picture that I took of myself, and I created a self portrait painting of this picture. Okay. So, that is the difference between a portrait and a self portrait. A portrait can be of anybody, and a self portrait is of yourself. So a self-portrait can be done in many ways. It can be done as a painting. It can be done as a drawing. You can have a self-portrait as a photograph. And you can also have self-portraits as sculptures. Okay. So let's back up a little bit and talk about where self-portraits started, the history of self-portraits. So if you see these pictures, these self-portraits right here, these were painted years and years and years ago. And this was the way that people would get pictures of themselves. Because you have to think about it. There was a point where cameras did not exist. So in order to get a picture of yourself, you had to sit down and someone had to draw you while you were sitting still. And that's how you would get a self-portrait. So artists throughout time have been very famously known for making self-portraits. This artist named Frida Kahlo, she's really, really famous for drawing herself. Okay, so this is a painting of her. This is a self-portrait of Vincent van Gogh. So we've talked about Van Gogh in class before. This is his portrait of himself. And for some grade levels, we've also talked about Pablo Picasso, and this is how he drew himself. So these are all considered self portraits because the artist drew or painted themselves. So let's talk about this. In today's world, we just take selfies, right? Okay. So, really, back in the day, it was kind of like they were doing exactly what we do now when we take selfies. So, a reflection question that I want you to answer is, do you think that self portraits are the modern day selfie? Now, let's talk about how we can create a self portrait. How is it that we can create a self portrait? One of the ways that we can create a self portrait is by observation. Okay, so I want you to say that with me, observation. And when an artist is drawing from observation, if we take this picture of this little girl, she's looking at this flower. And as she's looking at it, she's going to continue drawing it. So she's going to draw a little bit, and then she's going to look again, and then she's going to draw and look again. That's called drawing from observation. So when you are observing something, it means you are looking at it, okay? Okay, so we're looking at this picture of this little boy. He's looking at a toy insect. And he's looking at that, and at the same time, he's drawing a picture of that insect on his paper. Okay. And here are two other images of students looking at something and then drawing it at the same time. And what you're doing by looking at it is when you look at it, you get a more precise and accurate drawing. So if you are going to do a portrait and you are going to be observing yourself, that means you have to be looking at yourself while you are drawing that portrait. So, for instance, you at home have the option to look at yourself in the mirror while you are creating your self portrait, or you can look at a picture of yourself while you are creating your self portrait. So, this situation right here, this girl, she took half of her picture and she used it and observed it to make the right side of her photo. And just like how I showed you guys before, I made this self-portrait by looking at this picture of myself. So if you want to choose to create your self-portrait through observation, you can either look at yourself in the mirror and do it, or you can look at a picture of yourself and do it. Okay. And the reflection question that I want you to think about for this is, what is the difference between creating art through observation and creating art with your imagination? So let's talk about that. If you don't want to create a self portrait through observation, you can create it with your imagination. So when you're creating a self portrait with your imagination, you're kind of just coming up with it in your head. You're not necessarily looking at anything. You're kind of just going with the flow and coming up with your own idea of what you want your self portrait to look like. Okay. So when you are doing this assignment, you can choose to draw your self portrait through observation, or you can draw it using your imagination. Either one is up to you. Okay. Here are some examples that I just wanted to show you guys of some self portraits. Here are self portraits that some kindergartners did. These over here are what some fifth graders did. Okay. So just giving you guys some inspiration for when you start creating your own. And then you also can create your self portraits on the JS Paint app as well. So the last 2 weeks, you guys have been creating your artwork on the app. For this week, you get to choose whether you want to do it on paper or if you want to do it on the app. Either one is fine. Now, I will say that I suggest you guys trying to do it on the app just to get better at using it. But if you would like to do it on paper and pencil and take a picture of it and turn it in, that is totally fine with me. Okay. So for the rest of this video, you guys can watch me create a self-portrait using the app, and also watch me create a self-portrait drawing it on a piece of paper. Have fun creating your self-portraits, and if you need my help, feel free to email me. Bye, guys.